According to the Holy Scriptures, Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High, is set to bring immortality to the nation of Israel, the elect, via establishing the tabernacle of David, as we talk about the second coming of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. He is coming to take down this current world ruled by Esau, Edom, and establish a righteous kingdom, which is synonymous with the throne of David. That's scriptural, which is a government that's going to run this world in righteousness.
After this manner therefore pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
A transfer of rulership is coming, and the kingdom of heaven will be on earth. Righteousness will be spread throughout the whole four corners of the earth. Wickedness will be put down. Eternal life. That's what's promised to the elect. All right, all Israel, but it starts with the elect. And that's how the earth will be governed by immortals, perfect angelic forces who are going to come down and rule on earth. Extraterrestrial bodies will be able to do things that humans do, but in heavenly bodies, like eating, drinking. Did not Yahweh Shai say he's going to drink wine with us in the kingdom? Well, how do you drink wine with a spiritual body? Well, we're going to have out of this world capabilities in those new bodies.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect that believers and listeners who may have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and what I want to get into this morning, dealing with, the devil at work, all right, understanding the Middle East. Okay, now this region, which they call the Middle East, which is really, Western Asia, all right, but it's been turned, the Middle East, in modern speak. But when you go into understanding Esau, Edom, and his wickedness in that region, he's always been in that region, stirring up conflict, all right, setting up puppet leaders, okay, extorting, resources, okay, stealing resources, all right, et cetera, the MO of the devil. Matter of fact, real quick, all right, because as we've been told about Esau, Edom, let's go here. Yahweh Shai Psalms Esau up, okay, in the short precept, okay, when you go here to the book of John, all right, we always get it. It's the book of John, chapter 10 and verse 10. And it's good to go into this history now. And it goes into, because I think I've done a lesson on this before, but I believe it's a good time to go into the history to kind of make sense of the things that we see going on, because it can be confusing because the devil, he has so much, going on. All right. Now, when you go into St. John 10 and 10, it says the thief comes only in order to steal, kill, and destroy. And that's what all the devil is about. Wherever he sets up shop is to steal, kill, and destroy. Okay. America is the product of Esau setting up shop, killing, stealing, and destroying. Okay. They calling it a God-fearing country. Okay. Which is his God, we know the elites. When they speak of God, they're speaking of Satan. Okay. But they push this, this Christian, this wholesome Christian image of a nation of America. Okay. Well, America is the result of rob, rape, and murder and destruction. Okay. Witchcraft, enchantments. You see, anywhere the devil goes and sets up shop, okay, he's stealing, killing, and destroying. And as he set up shop over there in what they call the Middle East, what has been going on since then? Okay, constant war, stealing, destruction, okay, and war. It says, I came that they might have life and have it in abundance. And this is speaking to who? Israel, because we're getting ready to come into abundance, man. Under Esau, Edom, okay, we've been the tail. All right, under Edomite supremacy, we've been the tail of these nations, man. Okay, but the Heavenly Father, he's coming to make us the head. Okay, he's sending Yahushua to come to make us the head of remnant. Okay, and all we're going to know is abundance. It says to the full till it overflows. Okay, so life under Esau, Edom, for all these heathens, all right, all the working class of the heathen, okay, has been scarcity, man. Okay, and us, we're even below the heathen as the tail. All right, and as a people, all we know is scarcity. Okay, confusion, dysfunction. Okay, but this devil, he does this throughout the earth. But the Lord is coming to bring those that are the tail to the top. Okay, we're going to be the head. Okay, we're going to be in abundance forever. Okay, and this captivity is going to make us appreciate the blessings that the Lord is getting ready to give to his people, man. Okay, but just speaking on, okay, the MO of Esau, Edom, this is all he's about. Okay, this is all the devil is about. When you go here to the book of Micah, all right, we go into the book of Micah chapter 2 and verse 1. All right, it says, woe, judgment is coming to those who devise wickedness and plot evil on their beds. Okay, and this is Esau Edom, and his bed is his comfort. Okay, so from the comfort of his rulership, he's been able to come up with wicked counsels and execute on these wicked counsels because it's the power is in his hand, because he has, the finances, he has the military, he has the influence, through the media and politics to do so. Okay, it says when morning comes, they practice evil because it is in the power of their hand, as we just went into, man. Okay, so these devil have all the, for the longest they've been able to have these wicked counsels. Okay, and being able to forward these wicked counsels because they have, the power, to execute this wickedness is within the power of their hands. Okay, it said they covet fields and seize them and houses and take them away. They oppress a man and rob a man in his house, a man in his inheritance, man. So this man has went throughout the earth with the sword, okay, and just taken, all right, the earth, man, because the field is the earth, and this man has just been able to take the earth unto himself, all right, and this devil, okay, he'll come, he'll leave the people on the land, but steal the resources, man, okay, set up his corporations and industries to extrapolate the resources and put it on the global market, okay, while the people, the local people, okay, of their land, okay, are third world, okay. So the earth, no one is in the earth is able to benefit off, their own resources, okay, in their land, because this devil, All right. If he sees something of any value that you have, if he finds out that there's anything of value on your land, he's on the way. Okay. And it's by any means necessary, man. All of a sudden, your leader is this inhumane dictator. Okay. All of a sudden, there's a civil unrest. All right. To where people are calling for America to come liberate them. You know, which he does that through his CIA agents. You know, causes these manufactured uprising. All right. And he even go too far as arm. All right. A group of rebels. Okay. Then film it and put it on replay on CNN. Okay, as if it's a catastrophe that he needs to come in and save the day. So he comes in, he'll destabilize, okay, the different areas with these resources that he wants. Okay, then he'll bring his troops in to occupy. Okay, and no troops are there to occupy. All right, while these major corporations come and set up shop. Okay, to steal and destroy. Okay. They come take up, the land that's needed for their corporation. They pollute the land. So now, okay, the agriculture, all right, the agricultural sector, the different nations suffer because of the pollution. And the devil's factories and industries, man. Okay. So this is what the devil has been on in his rulership, man. Okay, said, therefore, thus said the Lord, behold, I am planning against this family a disaster. Okay, so the Lord is planning a disaster against these devils. And this is why the Lord has made these devils go to war, man. Because this war is going to be disastrous for Esau. This is it. Like a noose from which you cannot remove your necks, nor will you be able to walk haughtily, okay, and erect. For it will be an evil time of subjugation to the invaders. Okay, so against this whole family of Edomites, man, the Lord has a judgment, man. And ultimately, Esau, he just hung himself. Okay, this war that he just started, he just hung himself, is over. Okay, he gonna pull that MOTB out the hat, and that's it. Okay, this is his last trick. The MOTB out the hat, and he's out of here, man. It said, nor will you be able to walk haughtily and erect or proudly. Okay, Esau is not going to walk away from this one. Okay, what he's embarked on with this war, he's not going to walk away from this one, man. Okay, so I want to go here. I got this quick, Doc. Well, it ain't quick. About 20 minutes. Okay, I want to go here into this is how the U.S. stole the Middle East. Now he's going to go into some history, and it's relevant to what's happening today. So Lord Willis, it's informative in the spirit, and it opens up. Hopefully it gives a little more clarity what's going on. So he's going to go into how the U.S. stole the Middle East, all right, and their interests and the moves that they made, and certain things that he goes into. All right, we're seeing it playing out. Certain things have come to a head, okay, that the devil established in that region. Okay, so let's play this.
The part of Asia that Europeans see as the middle of what they see as the East. Sort of arbitrary, whatever. We call it the Middle East. This part of the world is literally where civilization started, right here in modern day Iraq. And over the years, the borders here have been redrawn many times as empires have ebbed and flowed through this region. By the way, I didn't make this time lapse. A very talented YouTuber did, and he deserves a medal for it. Or perhaps just a new patron. Thanks, man. Anyway, the most recent carving up of this region happened by European powers. The French, the British, the Russians. I mean, are we surprised? No. Like, of course it was the British. Of course it was the French. Of course it was Europeans. Of course. The lines they drew didn't really take into account language or ethnicity or regional identity. They just sort of sliced it all up amongst themselves and said, these are our new regions of power.
The earth is given into the hand of the wicked, so these Europeans have major interests. The French, the British, and mainly America, okay, have major interests in the Middle East, and that's why you see French this dispatch, supposedly supposed to be mobilizing their aircraft carrier and its certain troops, to protect its interests in Qatar and the UAE. Okay, these doubles, these Europeans, along with America, have colonized the earth. Okay, the whole earth is under, some type of colonization by these European powers. All right, mainly the French, the British, the Spanish, a little bit. All right, but mainly the top three: the French, the British, and America. Okay, and then Russia, which is the black sheep, of this beast system. Russia is not a part of the beast system. Okay, just to clarify that, it's on the outside of this beast system. Okay, but they're Edomites. It's an Edomite government, that's been contrary to, all right, these European governments. Okay, and which we know, okay, the elites, they play both sides. They have interests, within Europe, within Russia. Okay, but Russia, all right, has always had their differences with these European nations. Okay, some European nations are more, you know, um, they're more at odds in Russia than others, but there's always been a difference. Okay, but ultimately the earth is given into the hand of the wicked, and these devils, they just go throughout the earth carving it up. They carve up the Middle East. Okay, they carved up Africa. Okay, the British have had a big influence in China, in India. Okay, America, all these different islands. You know, so the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Okay, and that's why they're able to go about and just carve the earth up amongst themselves. Okay, but now we're seeing, all right, a resistance in this war, which is going to end, all right, this devil's rulership. You know,
In the Middle East. Eventually, those European powers left, but the lines they drew stuck around and became the skeleton for what the borders look like today. And this is where our story starts. In the 1930s, here in the modern Middle East. At this point, across the ocean, there was this growing superpower that had spent the last century moving west, taking over this whole continent and beyond deep into the Pacific Ocean. We've talked about that a bit. But things were changing. The world had just fought a brutal world war that was fought with new weapons that were powered by this new important substance, oil. Germany lost that war, in part because they didn't have access to enough oil to keep up with this new style of warfare that relied a lot more on machines. The young superpower realized that access to this stuff would determine who would be powerful and who would not. So they stopped looking west for a moment and turned east, with hopes of finding the fuel they needed to build their power. The US presence in the Middle East started with one little dot, right here. But soon that dot would expand into a sprawling network of alliances, covert attacks, flows of weapons, money, and the building of innumerable bases, and eventually turning into full-on ground wars. This is how the US stole the Middle East.
Ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
Okay, so it's the 1930s, and the US doesn't have a significant presence in the Middle East at this point. But that's about to change because there's a company based in California that wants to explore this vast desert for oil.
11,000 miles from San Francisco, there lies a primeval desert, a mass of drifting sand and sun-baked earth, 1/3 the size of the United States.
This was sort of a risky decision for the California company because, first off, they had no idea if there was actually any oil here.
They knew it would mean sinking into the desert the money of thousands of stockholders in a project that might well end in complete loss.
And second off, this desert was a part of a very hardcore religious kingdom.
The fact that Mecca is the source and the shrine of Islam gives Saudi Arabia a central place in the Islamic and therefore the Arab world.
That was home to the holiest sites in Islam, run by a dogmatic royal family that did not like outsiders, especially non-believing Westerners. But even still, the king of the desert kingdom eventually gives the California company permission to explore almost 1 million square kilometers of this desert looking for oil. And after a few years, the bet paid off. And on March 3rd, 1938, in this little patch of coastal desert, they struck gold. Well, actually, they struck oil, but it might as well have been gold. So throughout the 30s and 40s, American oil executives, workers, and their families started flocking to the Middle East, establishing the first significant American presence in the region. They set up little cities around the oil operation that were little slices of America, full of the deepest sinful behavior, like allowing women to drive and the consumption of alcohol.
Here is another American colony, complete with air-conditioned houses, 2 hospitals, and an outdoor movie theater.
This is the sort of stuff that is very off limits in Saudi Arabia. It's literally illegal at this point. So you have a lot of Saudis who are not happy about their government letting the Americans in to behave however they want. But the oil kept flowing. And soon the US government goes to the royal family and says, listen, the oil is flowing better than ever. This is awesome. How about we build a little military base attached to our little oil city so that we can, protect you and protect us and protect the oil and stuff. And the Saudis are like, okay, having the great Satan come to our country for oil is one thing, but letting them set up a full-on military base on our soil, and especially when everyone in our country is not happy with their presence in the first place. But, said the royal family, all of this oil is really valuable and it's really nice and we're getting super rich. So they're like, yeah.
And all these Gulf Arab states, sold out to these American oil companies. All right, with basically the elites. And they was pressured into doing that. All right. They put the pressure on them, especially once they found their oil. Even to let them in, how America get down. Okay. They put some pressure out there, for them to allow them to come and look for oil, and they found the oil. And then not only did they bring those companies, but they started to bring American culture, because these Saudi Arabians of today are way more westernized than, the Saudis of the 1930s. Okay. They're way more westernized because America, once they bring their corporations, they bring their culture. These little colonies that they start to build, because they have to start moving the engineers and, the technicians. So they set up a little neighborhood, a little town, and it's like a little America. Okay. And what happens? Their culture begins to, spread like a plague, that American culture. You see the women, they start looking at how the American women have all this freedom and liberty, and they get to dress how they want to dress and this and that. So now these women, they begin to want those things. Okay. The goddamn serpent, man. All right. But this is the beginning of America getting a footprint in this region, of the world.
Sure, set up the base. But there was one stipulation that the Saudis had for the Americans. You are not allowed to literally plant a flag, no flagpoles of the United States. You cannot put your flag anywhere on this base. Instead, you can put a little plaque on the side of the building so that your flag is not literally on our soil. And that was the deal. And that's exactly what happened. The US sets up its first military operation in the Middle East in the form of a landing strip that is right next to this oil field. Okay, so all of this infrastructure that the Americans were building required someone to build it. They needed a construction company. And there was one construction company that the Americans really liked that helped them build their oil city and their base. This company was founded and run by a guy named Mohammed. Now listen, do you think I'm really giving you the backstory on the construction company that built the air base in the oil city just because that's interesting and I like to talk about construction? No, this is actually very relevant to the story, and you will see why very soon. So the Americans and the Saudis are having this forbidden oil bromance, and it's going really well, and the oil is flowing, everyone's getting rich. And meanwhile, the rest of the Middle East is looking at Saudi Arabia, and they're like, dude, WTF, why are you in bed with America? And why are you letting them set up a landing strip in your country? And the Saudi royals are like, do you realize how rich we're getting right now? If you were in our position, you would do the same thing, Egypt. Okay, so it's the 1950s, and let's get back to Mohammed, the construction guy. His company, by this point, is thriving. The American presence in oil land is just exploding, and he is building all of the stuff for it. And so this guy has a giant business. And he starts to have children. Well, in fact, he had a lot of children, like 54 children, because he had 22 wives, because that is a thing in Saudi Arabia to this day. Anyway, the point is, one of Muhammad's sons is named Osama. I told you this was going to be relevant. Okay, a reminder that Saudi Arabia is not the entire Middle East. So I'm going to leave the Osama bin Laden cliffhanger for a moment to tell you what else was going on in the Middle East at this time. Remember that it was the hunt for oil that brought the US to Saudi Arabia originally. But now, in the 50s and 60s, there was a new reason for the US to think about the Middle East. And that reason is because there's another big superpower that has nuclear weapons, called the Soviet Union, who is coming into the region and saying to everyone, come join Team Communism. And the US is like, hold my beer. So in addition to oil, the US is now involved in trying to not let the Soviet Union have any power in this region. Over in Iran, there was a democratically elected leader that the US didn't like. They thought he was maybe a little too friendly with the Soviet Union. So they worked together with the British to literally overthrow the government of Iran so that they could install a dictatorial leader that was more friendly to the United States. Little side note here, the airport that I fly out of here in DC is named after the guy who gave the go-ahead for this coup in Iran, John Foster Dulles. So I'm reminded of the whole Iran thing every time I fly. So the US has its oil thing. It's now involved in trying to prop up a dictator in Iran. There's another big thing happening that brings the US into the region, which is that the newly declared state of Israel is starting to piss off its neighbors and starting to look to the US for support. And the US gladly offers it, seeing Israel as a friendly nation in the region that could be a big proponent of US interests.
So you see how they started to set up, once they found oil, all right, you see, well, they began to covet their field, okay, covet this region of the earth, all right. So they found the oil, they started, to set up, American communities in Saudi Arabia, okay. They built a, air base, airstrip in Saudi Arabia, all right. So now they starting to interfere with the politics, okay, of this whole region, to the point to where they overthrew Iran's elected government just to establish a dictator that was American friendly because they wanted Iranian oil. Okay, he was named as a Shah because now it's his son, that they was trying to speculate that they wanted to put him back in power when they took down the Ayatollah today. So this guy here, in his white outfit, okay, known as the Shah, all right, his son is whom they have today in America, and their fantasy plan was to remove the Ayatollah, okay, and set up his son back in power, okay, to have a Western, okay, friendly, government in Iran. There will be all down for American companies coming in and setting up, all right, and privatizing Iranian oil, okay, and also putting them under authority, all right, under the, making them a vassal unto these small hats, okay, and this is why America has armed, all right, these small hats to a T, okay, this is why they've armed, these small hats, because ultimately these small hats are nothing but a military outpost, okay, for America, okay, because these small hats have been given all this military technology and weaponry and all this intelligence, okay, to keep these nations in check, okay, to be a constant terror, all right, to these Middle Eastern nations, okay, that are subjugated to America, okay, and Iran, all right, they overthrew this nigga, which he gonna get into it, okay, he gonna get into it, all right, it's gonna line up, I pray this is making sense, giving more clarity to what we see going on in that region. Okay, but these small hats, they just been, a military state. Okay, to enforce compliance from these nations, to remind them, all right, it will be wise to be compliant to the American hegemony. All right, so let's play this.
US starts to fund Israel with tons of money and fighter jets and all of these things to help them fight their wars against their Arab neighbors. There was a debate happening in the United States on whether or not they should actually do all of this to support Israel so intensely, because they knew if they did, they were going to piss off all of the neighbors in the Middle East. And all of the neighbors are the ones who had the oil. In the end, the US did decide to support Israel. And with that came a major backlash from all of these oil-producing countries in the neighborhood.
There's a crisis of such proportion that we probably haven't even begun to grasp it yet as far as the country is concerned.
Scenes like this are becoming all too common on both sides of the Atlantic. But for America, they are more ominous. They tell the Arabs that their oil weapon is wounding America, the country that supports and supplies their enemy Israel.
Eventually, this backlash against supporting Israel kind of calmed down. There was some peace talks. And anyway, let's get back to Mohammed, the construction guy, and his son Osama, because this is where it really starts to heat up.
And it is this world of religious authority and deeply rooted traditions that is now being challenged by the wealth of oil and the Western invasion it has brought.
So it's now the 70s, and Mohammed bin Laden, the construction guy, is now insanely rich. His construction company is giant. His 54 children are also rich. And his son Osama is growing up and is in his 20s and is looking around at all of this stuff happening in Iran and in Israel, and is starting to feel really uncomfortable with the notion of his family being so supportive of American presence in the Middle East, and his government, this religious kingdom, home of Mecca and Medina, being so okay with the US so embedded in the Middle East at this point. These are ancient holy lands. Why is my government and my family supporting this great Satan superpower coming in and becoming so involved in the Middle East? So bin Laden sets out on a lifelong quest to fight back against these superpowers, not just the US, but also the Soviet Union, invading the Middle East. He heads to Afghanistan, where the Soviet Union is invading Afghanistan, trying to take it over. Bin Laden wants to fight back. By the way, the same year in Iran, that dictator that the US put in gets overthrown in a giant religious revolution that gets rid of the old dictator that the US liked and puts in a religious government headed by this guy, Ayatollah Khomeini.
And this is the guy, all right, that American small has just on the live. Okay, Ayatollah Khomeini. Okay, so when they overthrew their Western dictator, all right, the Shah, they installed the Ayatollah. Okay, so this is happening at the same time. Bin Laden, he's finna go and fight. He's finna start. It's like he's gonna begin to organize what we know as a Taliban today to fight the Soviets, okay, which the Taliban was funded by the West. Okay, so bin Laden, was funded by the West to fight the Soviets. Okay, now how, was he, anti-West and anti-Soviet? We don't know, but we know for sure that one thing that he was funded and set up by the CIA and weaponized by the CIA, okay, to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. Okay, the Taliban was made possible by CIA training and funding, okay, to be used as a proxy to fight the Soviets. Now, America, when they do train and arm these proxies to fight, because Esau got so much wickedness going on, and it is always some type of backlash. Now, he does prop up and train these people to fight, and they do turn on him at times. All right, they do turn against America. Okay, that happens. Okay, it's just a bunch of mess because this nigga is so wickedness. He got so much wickedness going on. Okay, there's a hurricane. It could be a hurricane to keep up with. But we just gonna keep it surface level, not to get too deep, but just to hit the main points of these different narratives that's been going on. All right, in the what they call the Middle East. Okay, so now you have this guy, the Ayatollah, They overthrow the, the Western dictator, and they say he was a complete tyrant, to Iran, to those Iranians. Okay. And that's why those older Iranians, they have such a hard stance against the West, because they know what the West is about. You see, Iran never, took, all right, Western money, okay, to privatize their oil to the West, for the West to come in and build infrastructure, okay, and for them to be able to trade, in the world market, okay. That's why Iran has been under sanctions for the last 47 years, okay. It started when this, all right, the Ayatollah, okay, Khamenei, when he came into power, all right. But you had Bin Laden at the same time, getting ready. The CIA is getting him ready to go against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So let's play this.
This new government takes a bunch of Americans hostage and starts off hating the United States. And I mean, can you blame them? If someone overthrew the person I elected, I would be pretty pissed too. So anyway, back to Bin Laden. He arrives to Afghanistan with a few things. Number one, a bunch of money. Remember, his family's like super rich. He also comes with construction infrastructure because he's like a construction guy. Like his family knows construction and infrastructure building. But most importantly, he comes with an obsessive dedication to fighting back against any superpower that is invading the Middle East. So Osama joins in with all of these rebel fighters who are fighting back against the Soviet Union. And they fight a long, brutal war. By the way, the US was secretly loving this, loving that the Soviet Union was getting like beat back by these like rebel fighters. So they end up sending loads of weapons and money and support to these fighters, something that will come back to bite them a few decades later.
Yeah, and this is like I said, all right, the West prop this guy up, okay, to be a militant, okay, because if your father's allowed to have those big contracts with the West, you got to be juiced in, okay. So they propped this guy up and they used him, but when they didn't need him anymore, it was easy to make him a villain, okay. This is what these devils do. They prop these different groups up, okay, and then all right, you have some groups that naturally go rogue, but then some groups, when they don't have any use for them, okay, it's easy to make these groups the villain. Okay. So, we'll never know the exact, it's all mostly speculation. All right, but just understanding the pattern of the devil and how he works, man. Okay. So now you see how these different characters, they don't just pop out of nowhere. Okay. A lot of it is linked, to what American, all right, American wickedness, man. Okay, these are all part of American schemes and plots in their region. Okay, so these characters just don't come out of the blue, and become these national criminals, these global criminals out of nowhere, man.
Eventually, Osama and the Afghan fighters beat back the Soviet Union. It was 10 brutal years of war, and by the end, these fighters were battle-hardened. Osama was now completely dedicated to his cause of fighting back against superpowers who were coming into the Middle East. So he returns back to Saudi Arabia, where he starts raising money and awareness for his new group that he started while he was in Afghanistan. It's called Al-Qaeda. And the mission of the group is to protect Islam through violently striking back against big superpowers coming into the Middle East. And Saudi Arabia's like, Osama, like, do you have to do this, dude? Do you realize how rich we're getting? Like, Saudi princes are living on yachts in the south of France and like flying in their private jets. And they're like, dude, chill. Like, it's fine. We get it. We don't like the United States, but like, can you like maybe chill? Our partnership with the United States is actually turning out to be really great. And I know, yeah, they're really into Israel and they're really bad and everything, but like, they buy our oil and they give us weapons and we're like doing just fine over here.
So they completely sell out. These are these Gulf era states have become the lapdogs of these Western, all right, governments, man. All right, these EU nations in America. Okay, mainly America. And this is why we see Iran, targeting these Gulf Arab states and these American military bases. See, this has been a long time coming. You see, this is what Iran is tearing down in days. Okay, all this buildup in this region over these decades, so Iran is tearing it down in days. Okay, America has invested a lot into this region, man. Okay, so this is strategically being done by Iran, which has always been the black sheep of these Gulf Arab nations, man. Okay, and for a reason, because the Lord had them set aside for a reason. While Russia, the black sheep of these European nations, they're set aside for a reason. Okay, the Medes and the Persians and the Persians, man. Okay.
Osama doesn't chill, and the Saudi government eventually takes away his passport, not letting him leave, and told him to hush up with all the anti-American holy war talk. So Osama finds another plan to maybe win back the heart of the royals. Saudi Arabia has a next-door neighbor named Iraq who was run by Saddam Hussein, who Osama sees as a really bad Muslim, totally secular and brutal, and he's just like not a good guy. Saddam is also cashing in on the oil boom. He's building big palaces and statues of himself all over the country. Oh yeah, and he also used the oil money to build a giant army, like the fourth biggest in the world. With this massive army, Saddam decided that he could maybe multiply his oil reserves if he popped down to invade this little tiny country of Kuwait, where there's also loads of oil. This sort of freaked the Saudis out. If Saddam, with his giant army, could grab Kuwait, what would stop him from marching right across this desert into Saudi Arabia? So there's this moment that it's like the moment of infamy of this whole thing, where Osama goes to the Saudis and he says,
"I volunteer as tribute."
He doesn't actually say I volunteer in tribute. That was Hunger Games.
I believe we have a volunteer.
But he effectively says, I have me and my battle-hardened men who can go in and fight against Saddam and defend the kingdom. And the Saudis are like, no, we're not gonna let this ragtag group of rebel fighters fight off the fourth largest army in the world. And Osama's like, well, we beat the Soviets. They're a big army with nuclear weapons and everything. And the Saudis are like, yeah, because you hid in the hills in caves in Afghanistan. Prince Sultan literally told bin Laden verbatim, quote, "There are no caves in Kuwait." And then he asks them, what will you do when he lobs the missiles at you with chemical and biological weapons? Osama's response, we will fight them with our faith. And the Saudis are like, awkward. Sorry, dude. Instead, the king met with somebody else that he thought would make a much better fit than bin Laden and his faith fighters.
And the elites, all right, in America, they was in the background orchestrating that whole, fiasco with Saddam supposedly invading Kuwait, all right, Kuwait, because the elites, they wanted, all right, to put a foothold in Iraq. Okay, so they orchestrated that in the background. I said we're not gonna go deep into it, but they orchestrating that whole thing with with Iraq supposedly want to invade Kuwait, which this is where you have Desert Storm. This was the reason for Desert Storm. Okay, and this was just an excuse to bring more military presence to that region of the earth. Okay, now how true that story is with bin Laden, trying to go and fight Saddam, don't know, but we know that America wanted more military presence in that region. Okay, but you see all these different characters whom they presented as villains. Okay, because there's mixed stories about Saddam. Some say he was, tyrant. Some say he was, a decent leader. But neither here and there. Either way, America wanted more military presence. That was the whole play. All right. So now, they made this big thing as if Saddam was just, you know, trying to conquer the whole Middle East, okay, with this big military. All right, mind you that he's getting rich off of oil money that he's been allowed to sell on the open market. So you know the elites, all right, they're allowing Saddam to be rich, okay, but they prop these leaders up, and at their convenience, all right, they make these certain leaders a villain. Okay, it's the damn devil, treacherous. This nigga treacherous, man. Okay, so let's play this. Now you have what we call Desert Storm. Okay, so now once you see this nigga on the scene in this suit, okay, nothing but war and disaster is coming next. Okay, once you see this nigga on the block with this suit, okay, when this nigga get out the plane, all right, and y'all had that one meeting, it's over with from there. Okay, so let's play this.
Dick Cheney had flown to Saudi Arabia the day after Saddam had invaded Kuwait. At this point, the bromance between the US and Saudi Arabia had cooled a little bit, as Saudi had gotten more and more flack for being in bed with the US. But even despite this, he told Cheney to...
And remember, Dick Cheney is a politician, but the devil also owned oil, all right? Dick. Let me get this real quick. So when you go into Dick Cheney, all right, he was a politician, but the devil also had ties, okay, with oil, okay. All right, I said Dick Cheney serves as chairman and CEO of Halliburton Company, a major American oil field services and construction conglomerate, okay, construction, because there's another thing these devils do, you know, is they, you know, bomb, all right, they bomb these Middle Eastern countries to death. Well, they contract the rebuilding to these American companies. Okay, it says from 1995 to 2000, during this tenure, based in Dallas, Houston, he expanded, all right, his government contracts and global reach. Okay, he left in 2000 to become vice president following controversies, all right, over accounting and ties to nations under sanction, man. So just underhanded dealing, man. Crook. Okay, all these devils are crooks, man. Okay. All right. It says controversy. During his tenure, the company faced scrutiny for doing businesses with countries under U.S. sanctions such as Libya, Iran, and Iraq. Following his departure, the company was scrutinized for its contracts during the Iraq War. Okay, so here it is, the devil, you know, and that's why in 2000 they went right back into Iraq. Okay, while this nigga was vice president under Bush Jr. Okay, what happened? They went right back into Iraq, man. You know, and he's just securing contracts. Okay, setting up deals, and you see, that's what this is what the devil does, man. Okay, but he'll present to you like Saddam, all right, is just getting ready to take over the world. You know, like Saddam is just this monster that got to be stopped immediately. Okay, and this nigga show up the next day. You see, because his wickedness was already planned, man. Okay, so let's go here, and it's the same thing that we see today. You know, they demonize this person. That's why I look like You know, and for a while, they was America looked like the hero. They was stopping the world from being conquered by tyrants. You know, there's a narrative that America has been able to run with. Okay, is these heroes are stopping the world from being conquered by tyrants, man. Okay, but now everything's in the open, and it's like, no, this nigga is the problem. Okay, he's the true terrorist of the earth, man. So let's play this.
Come with as much force and as quickly as he could. And that is exactly what Dick Cheney did.
Ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
The U.S. went insane here. They recruited 37 other countries, and then they sent more firepower in terms of ships and bombers and troops and all this stuff than you and I could ever imagine. It was insanity. And they totally crushed Saddam. Within a few weeks, they had pushed Saddam back and completely won over the hearts of the royals. The bromance is back in business. So now you have these Saudis that are beaming at the Americans for helping them fight off Saddam. And you have a bunch of bases that the U.S. set up to mount this attack.
There was a whole purpose for America to have a major military footprint, okay, in the Middle East. That was the whole reason of that Gulf War. Okay, was America to create a narrative that they're needed in their region to protect the world from boogeymen in their region. Okay, that was the whole purpose. All right, this is what Iran is attacking. The decades-long military buildup. Iran is erasing America's footprint that they've been establishing for decades over there in their region, man. Okay.
Way more than before. The U.S. came with all of this firepower and manpower and bases and artillery, and then they just sort of never left. Something that really pissed off a lot of Saudis who were very uncomfortable with U.S. presence to begin with. But the guy who was most pissed off than anyone in the Middle East at this point, Osama bin Laden, who had not only been rejected by his own country.
Well, what you know, they're going to go into the narrative going into 9/11, which we know, there's a whole nother, you see. But that's the main point of the video. It's about 3 minutes left. I just want to show that, mainly. All right. So let's go here. Get a few precepts. All right, when you go to let's go to the book of Nahum, chapter 3. All right, this is the book of Nahum, chapter 3. This is in KJV. All right, this is Nahum 3 and 4. It says, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot. Okay, because America made itself well-favored because it allowed the nations to become rich, where the elites of these nations, to where these the governments or these ruling families of these nations, okay, will be in bed with the whore. Okay. It said the mistress of witchcraft, the master of witchcraft, that selling nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. Okay, because you have these nations that have, that are ran by governments. Okay, certain democracies, and then you have these nations that are ran by families, because these Gulf Arab states are ran by ruling families. Okay, in which they all get in bed with the whore to benefit off, the global trade from the whore. But then they have to take on, all right, the enchantments, okay, and the culture of the whore. Okay, that's why these Saudis are now, you see these Saudis, they all into the freakism, okay, of the West. Okay, you go into these ruling families, Islam is supposed to be a strict religion. Okay, Islam is supposed to be a strict religion, But these royals and these Saudis, all right, the different princes and different ruling elite families of these Gulf Arab states, man, they're turned out. They're with the Epstein crew now. Okay, they're fully turned out, but this devil, he does this throughout the world. Okay, South Korea, okay, Japan, all right, China, they're all the way turned out. Okay, by the whore. You see, it says, "Behold, I am against thee," said the Lord of hosts, "and I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness and the kingdoms thy shame." Okay, so now shame is being brought out on the devil on what he's been doing this whole time. Okay, and what this devil, what the elites of these devils are really into. Okay, so America was looked at as the model, okay, of how these nations should be, and now these nations are seeing, okay, what America and these Edomites were about the whole time. Okay, I will cast abominable filth upon thee and make thee vile, and will set thee as a gazing stock, man. So now America is being looked at, the Western elites. All right, these Edomites, man, they're being looked at as a gazing stock, man. They've been looking at it as filth. Okay. Now the Lord is really showing, all right, this false character, of America being this, this wholesome Christian, okay, family oriented, humanitarian. Nah, man, the truth about what America has always been about is now coming to the forefront. What Esau, these Edomites have always been about, is coming to the forefront, man. Okay, this is a lewd people. Okay, but when you go here to Habakkuk, and we can, but these nations have, sold themselves out to America, man. For those goodies. Okay, but you have, certain nations, especially Iran, has always been the black sheep. Okay, of course they participate, in certain, they have to, they have to modify themselves, to deal, okay, amongst these nations today. Okay, but they never, became a lapdog to the elites like these other Gulf Arab states. Okay, it said Habakkuk 2:4 said, "Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith." All right, so this man Esau Edom, he can't be right. Okay, it's not in him to do right. Okay, so this man has went throughout the earth, treachery, wickedness, okay, lewdness, okay, stealing, all right, starting wars, okay, he double crossing, triple crossing, putting nations against each other. Okay, verse 5, it says, "Yeah, also because he transgresses by wine, he is a proud man." Okay, so this devil, he's been able to influence the earth. Okay, he's been able to infiltrate all these nations with his wine, with his doctrine. Okay, and this devil, he drunk off his own wine, man. That's why he just staggering in the earth like a drunk man, because he's been able to prosper in his wickedness and infiltrate these nations and influence these nations with his wine. He's drunken off his own wine. He's a proud man. Okay, neither keep it at home, who enlarges his desire is hell and is death and cannot be satisfied, man. Okay, so this man is always roaming the earth, seeing what he can take next. Okay, seeing who can he impoverish next, and how can he enrich himself, man. So he just going through the earth like a madman with all this military might, like a drunk madman with all this military might, man, and all this wealth and influence, man. Just staggering around the earth doing what he want. Okay, he said, "But gathering unto him all nations and heaping unto him all people," man. Okay, and this man has just been on the tear. Okay, He's just been on the, especially these last 100 years, man. This man has been on the tear, especially post World War II. Okay, America has really just been on the tear throughout the earth, man, just throwing his weight around, putting all people. Okay, that's why he wants to. That's why he does these coups and these regime change. All right, because he wants every government to be under the influence of the whore. Okay, it says, "Shall not all these take up a parable against him?" And they told him proverb against him, saying, "Woe to him that increases that which is not his. How long? And to him that laded himself with thick clay." Okay, so now we're seeing these nations begin to take up a tone proverb. Okay, now we're seeing a major resistance. See, now we're seeing a rebellion against the king. Okay, now we're seeing a rebellion against the beast, man. You see, and this devil has put himself in thick clay, this debt. Okay, because this devil runs the earth off of debt. Okay, here it is, America, all right, the richest, strongest country in the earth, but it's running off a deficit, man, a debt. In order to maintain his empire, man, he keeps himself in debt. So you keep reading. It says, "Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them." Okay, so now we're seeing this prophecy coming to pass, man. Okay, these nations are starting to bite back. All right, and Iran was just the first up to really start to bite back against this system, man. Okay, because even the nations that are ingredients to this system, man, the Lord gonna put the spirit on these nations to fight, to bite back, man. Okay, because remember, in the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits, man. And this is one of these straits. These nations really beginning to buck up against the devil, man. Okay, it says, "Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land of the city, and of all that dwell therein," man. And this man has a lot of blood on his hands, man, all throughout the earth, man. Okay, and what we're seeing in these nations, all right, are now going to come against, all right, this Western hegemony. Okay, now we're going to see that these nations take up this taunting proverb, man. Okay, because it's time for the Edomite empire to end. The Lord is getting ready to close out this devil's rulership. Okay, so all he got left, is to pull this MOTB out the hat, and he out of here, man. Okay, because the third world war has already started. Okay, so now this MOTB, okay, this is just going to open them up to their ultimate destruction, man, when he makes this thing mandatory. So yeah, the Most High checkmate is over. The game over. Okay, Esau has no more moves to make. Okay, that's going to do him any good. He has no more moves left on the board. Okay, the MOTB, that's just going to bring him closer to the end. So he has no more moves that can benefit him on the board, man. Okay, so yeah, just want to get into that. Just want Lord Wood has brought more clarity to the things that we see happening and going on right now. So that's the point. Just want to tap into that, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters, we're edified. Till next time I say shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abba, soon shalom.